Welcome to Bloor Central, friends. This is the YouTube version of Sunday Word. To be honest, I'm not really sure what Sunday this is covering. We've really run into some difficulties just as we're in the Christmas rush, and also we've had some people ill and some people have been away. So we've not been posting the videos as regularly as we would have liked to. So step 9 we did a few weeks ago. This is December 1st now. So this is from a couple Sundays ago. We're continuing to post these things because we know that some people are reviewing, some people have missed out on something, missed a Sunday, so they want to cover it. So we're hoping that by recording this is going to be helpful to you in some way. Thanks for joining us anyway. So we're again on step 9, and it says this: we made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. As we look at this step, and I really believe this is, well, all of the steps are really important. They progress on each, but this is kind of a critical one. This involves a great deal of wisdom if we're to carry this out properly, because it involves us approaching other people, which, that means that we have to think through things from other people's point of view. And I wanted to share a passage of scripture that very much ties in with step 9. This is a story of Zacchaeus. I'm reading from Luke chapter 19. I'm going to read just the first 8 versions. It talks about a guy named Zacchaeus. I'm reading from the New International Version. It says this: Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, "He's gone to be the guest of a sinner." But as Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham." There's some beautiful things happening in this story. Zacchaeus is acknowledging that, Jesus is inviting him to a new way of life. And as Jesus gives him this opportunity, he knows that there has to be some response. We see here evidence of confession, of seeking forgiveness, and of making amends. He's actually putting what he's asking for forgiveness, he's putting himself in action. And it's the combination of those 3 things. All of us deal with relationships where we run into conflict. And we need all of these ingredients: the confession, seeking forgiveness, and making amends, seeking to make it right. We talked about that last week. Making amends it basically means like trying to fix what you broke, trying to just make this work again, trying to set it right. Unless we have all 3 of these ingredients, the confession, the forgiveness, and making amends, our relationships are going to be constantly limited. They're just going to be superficial, because we're never really going to come to a way to deal with the conflict that we struggle with. And we miss out on all of the rich benefits of meaningful relationships. I've made reference so many times about the loneliness in the city. I continue to be convinced it's one of the things that we struggle with the most in Toronto. And, it's not a lack of people. Loneliness isn't about a lack of people. It's about a lack of connection. Our inability to build healthy connections with each other keeps us isolated and lonely. And scripture talks a lot about how we can learn to connect. And step 9 is a really important principle in that. It teaches us how to move through these difficult times to build healthy and deep and meaningful relationships that will enrich our lives. And one part of that is, in building healthy relationships, with God and with others is to the very best of our ability to make things right in a way that it does not cause further harm. You know, this story in Luke 19, this event that is recorded there of Zacchaeus, I mean, Zacchaeus represents for me someone who is so desperately isolated. This guy was lonely. He was a tax collector. So he was a Jew, and he was rejected by the Jews because he worked for the Romans. But he was rejected by the Romans because he was a Jew. He's the ultimate outcast. Not only that, it gets worse. He's short. You know, I was kind of short as a kid too. I know what it's like when you're the smallest guy in the crowd and you can't see and you can't, you know, sometimes people overlook you because you're so small. Zacchaeus he didn't have much going for him in many ways. It says he's wealthy, but he was an outcast. And he's desperately searching for something in his life, and he hears that Jesus is coming, and he's so desperate to see Jesus that, in fact, he does something very undignified. He actually climbs a tree. And this is a beautiful story. I can't spend all the time on this story, but it is a beautiful story to read, that here is this man that is desperate for connection. He's even climbing a tree just because he wants to see who this guy Jesus is. And Jesus calls him from this place of isolation in the tree. He invites him to come down, and they end up sitting at a table together at his home. So it's an invitation from isolation to a table. It's an invitation that takes him from being alone into a community. And then Zacchaeus instinctively knows that something special is going on here, something that Jesus is inviting him to be a part of, and he recognizes that there has to be an appropriate response. So he makes this dramatic statement. He stands up and declares in front of Jesus, I'm going to give half of everything I own to the poor. I'm going to make sure that I pay back anybody I've cheated 4 times. You know, for him to simply say, oh yeah, thanks Jesus, nice of you to come over, that would have been an empty kind of response, you know, to someone who has been given such a wonderful opportunity from the Lord. He knew his relationship with Jesus involved not just him and the Lord, but this relationship actually involves how he was going to respond to the community around him. And that's why his making amends involved reaching out to others. You know, there's all kinds of things going on in this story, and I think really the big book talks about this. The big book of AA, in page 83 and 84, it says, you know, we will know peace. We will intuitively know how to handle situations that used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. I really believe that's exactly what was happening with Zacchaeus. He didn't know how to handle this, and suddenly, as he's sitting there with the Lord, there's clarity. He knows what he needs to do, and then he jumps into action. This is Zacchaeus really working out step 9. It's a tangible expression of working out step 9, and I just want to spend some time looking at it today, and I'm hoping this will be helpful to you. We're taught, you know, restitution has to begin when we face those people that we have hurt. Family, friends, neighbors, workmates, people that you see regularly, maybe people that you don't see very often. You know, this involves tracking down those people to the very best of your ability, seeking them out, so in a way that will not cause further harm. You want to acknowledge to them that you have caused pain and express your desire to somehow make it right. Sometimes these things have really happy endings. I've seen friendships and relationships restored. You know, you might be able to go back to the way it was before. However, whenever we seek to move into step 9, it is no guarantee that there will be a happy ending. There are some people that might not be receptive. They don't want to talk to you. And you know, we need to really seek wisdom in how we do. It's not something to be rushed into. You know, there's many things that we cannot control. We've caused pain, and those people that we seek to try and make amends with, they might be resistant. They might not want to talk to us. But that does not absolve us of the responsibility of trying. We can't control how they respond, but we will do everything that we can that is within our power to make it right. That can give us a great sense of peace that I've done everything I possibly can do to sort this out. They have not received me. They don't want to talk to me, or they don't want to, talk about making amends. That is their decision. But we can have the freedom saying, I've done the best I can. We have the ability to move on. We'll talk about that a bit later, but there are those cases where it's impossible to face the people that we've hurt. Maybe you don't know where they are. Maybe they've passed away. And in those situations when we realistically cannot connect with the people that we've hurt, we refer to this thing as making indirect amends. And I hope I can describe this adequately, but making indirect amends is really making amends through God. You can't face that person. You've done the very best you can. You cannot face that person. So you go through God. And through prayer and meditation, you come to God and say, Lord, I need to somehow bless that person. I pray that you will put a blessing on that person that I hurt. You might even, as an indirect amends, say, Lord, I'm going to continue to work these 12 steps so that I can learn to be less selfish, so that I will never hurt a person like this again. So in that way, again, you're making things right by making yourself right, by working on yourself to make sure that you don't hurt people like this again. There's all sorts of ways to be making indirect amends. I can remember there was a person that I really wanted to make amends with, but they died. They died soon after we had this conflict, and it was something that I was really praying about. And God put on my heart to be praying for his family, to be praying for his children. And so that's what I did. For a period of time, I committed myself to be praying for his 2 children, that God would comfort them, protect them, and that was a form of indirect amends. I do want to encourage you, though, making indirect amends does require brutal honesty and a sincere desire to make things right. Indirect amends is not a substitute for facing the person that you've hurt. This isn't a way of conveniently getting out of it. Indirect amends is only reserved in those times when it is literally impossible or perhaps unadvisable. But it is not meant to be a way of just getting out of having to face up to things. Step 9 does acknowledge that there are times when it's simply not wise to make amends. Sometimes it's going to injure people worse. At the very end there, it says, except when to do so would injure them or others. There are many situations that I've heard about where, as a person tries to make amends, they actually cause further pain. It's not just the person you've hurt, but it could be your loved ones. It could be the loved ones of the person you hurt. There are all kinds of examples where we can realistically sit down and say, hey, I honestly feel bad about this. I want to make amends, but I realize that if I try to make amends, I'm going to hurt a lot more people. So again, examples. I spoke with someone one time that they realized that making amends was going to result possibly in them going to prison. Now they were willing to go to prison, and eventually they found out they didn't have to. But in that situation, if you are going to make amends and have to go to prison, do you have people that are counting on you? Do you have other people that rely on you? They're going to be hurt by this. I read another situation of a man who many years earlier had an affair with one of his friend's wives, his friend's wife. And very early in the marriage, they had a very short affair, which did not last long, and they immediately broke it off, and they just went forward. But years later, this man was having guilt about having an affair with his friend's wife. By that time, this couple had been married several years, they had children, they were doing well, and this individual realized, if I'm going to go to my friend and confess to him what I've done, this could destroy his family. And so there was this real confirmation in his heart, me making amends cannot be done. I cannot go and face it. It's going to cause further pain. So there are some things that can be done, and I guess this is a form of indirect amends. One thing you can do is you can confess what you've done to someone else. This is where a sponsor can be very handy. You want to confess your, how you've really hurt someone. You want to confess that to someone who's not going to be sharing it with other people, who's not going to be causing further pain. And a sponsor, someone you trust, someone who's maybe walked this road before, is a person that maybe you can talk to them and share with them and say, listen, I need to tell somebody what I've done, and in a very confidential and discreet way, explain the nature of how you have hurt others. A second part is to realize that God does forgive us. Maybe sometimes we cannot approach that person and we feel we have to carry this guilt. God can offer us forgiveness when we come before him and confessing. And confessing is a big deal. It's saying that I did wrong. It's my fault. It's my fault I did this. I'm not going to blame it on anyone else. And I've done the very best I can to make amends for it. We can remember that we tried to, we have that peace within us that we have done our very best to make amends for what we've done. We can make resolutions in our life. We can commit to God that we will never hurt a person the way that we hurt this person. All these things, there are ways that we can work through making amends. Again, this is not a way of getting out of facing the person. And it's not meant to be a convenient escape hatch kind of thing. But when we recognize that making amends can cause further pain, we have to be very wise in how we go about making amends and how we respond when we can't face a person. The last thing that we can do when it would cause further pain, and this is really important, that we would learn to live forward. Don't allow those things that we've done in our past to hold us back. We need to trust God that as we do the very best we can, we need to trust God that he will rebuild our lives and our relationships, and we can move forward, not held back by guilt or shame, that we can move forward. The complexities of step 9, and it's almost limitless. There are all kinds of different issues that we need to be considering. And again, that's one reason why I would suggest step 9. I really think if you've not gotten a sponsor for any of the other steps, a sponsor or a mentor, someone who can help you just through this step, I think is extremely valuable. I'm not sure that step 9 can be done without some form of sponsor or mentor that can help us to navigate some of these issues and to get some input. Again, someone that is trustworthy, further along in the journey than us, and who's going to be confidential, obviously. Okay, so they can really challenge you. Someone like that can really challenge you in those times when you're tempted to cut some corners and things. So I'd like to consider just a couple of things that are involved here as we look to make amends, as we look to come before these people that we've hurt. I guess basically 3 things. The first thing to consider is timing, is to make sure that we think through the best time to approach a person about, making amends. You don't want to rush into this. So many times as people spontaneously just rush into this, they can make lots of mistakes that really kind of handicap you from moving forward. Perhaps the person that we've hurt isn't ready to speak to us. Maybe you need to wait a period of time. Finding a time when they're not going to be thinking about other things. Just paying attention, looking for the right time to speak to them. Patience and discernment and all these things are so important so that we're going to choose the right time. I read through what sounded like a good idea, someone who sort of said, who when they were making up their list, they realized they had a long list, and they were advised to choose the 5 easiest people. You might have a long list of people to approach. Choose the 5 easiest people to go to them first, because and you're not really thinking that this will be a big deal. You'll think these will be the ones that are going to be most open to you making amends. as you go to these people, you can build some confidence and recognize the benefits. And as you move forward to maybe some of the people that are going to struggle, you've got some more experience. So that's something that might help you to recognize, hey, this isn't the time for me to go talk to this person. That's going to be tough. But here's a person over here I can talk to right now, and I can get some experience in this, so that maybe further down the line, it'll be appropriate to talk to another one. As I was reading about that too, someone else shared with me and they gave me permission to share this, but I met someone who, after he'd made it, he recognized there were 70 people that he had to make amends to. And his sponsor actually suggested, 70, that's a lot. He said, why don't you choose 5? Start with 5. Just, don't bite off more than you can chew here. Don't get overwhelmed. Just decide right now that these are the 5 people that you are going to start with. Once you've done those, then you can move on to another. Just, take it one step at a time. So in that moment, this individual decided, and sat down and considered it carefully and decided, okay, I've chosen the 5 people. On his way home that day, on the subway, he ran into one of the 5 people he'd chosen to speak to. It was not a person he saw very often, but there they were. And it just gave him a great opportunity. As a matter of fact, he got off at their stop and walked with them while explaining what he was doing. And it led to a restoration in the relationship. That reminded me that when we enter these kind of spiritual discipline, these spiritual exercises, like the 12 steps, when we start intentionally trying to move forward in our relationship with God, it gives God an opportunity to get involved. You know what I mean? Like, as we make these commitments, God, if we're being sincere and honest with ourselves, God can work around the mess that we've made. He can help us as we seek to clean things up. So these things really just give God room to work in our lives. And I just love the stories that people tell me about, the restoration they receive through step 9. So timing was the first. The second thing I think needs to be really carefully considered is the approach. How are you going to approach this person? There's a couple things that I'd advise you not to do. First of all, don't try to make yourself look like some kind of angel. I've seen this happen where people have decided they're going to come and they're going to try to make amends. And as they come to this person, they make it sound like they're so morally superior to everybody, because here I am, I'm trying to make it right. And they try to make themselves out to be some kind of hero. I'll tell you what, to someone you've hurt, when you come to them and you're trying to present yourself as some kind of, person to be respected and honored because of what they're doing, that can really cause pain. That can be very difficult to deal with. There needs to be deep humility. There needs to be a recognition in the way that we do it that, hey, this was my fault. I messed up. I've hurt you. So again, just how we present ourselves. The second thing I'd advise against, don't place the pressure on the person that you've hurt that you are expecting this relationship to go back to the way it was before. That is not fair. If you have hurt someone, that you cannot expect them that just because you've approached them to make amends, that everything's going to go back to be normal. Sometimes those relationships have been broken beyond the ability to go back to the way they were. And to place an expectation on those you've hurt is really disrespectful. So just thinking through how you are going to approach people in a respectful, humble way, really making sure that you're doing it humbly. And how do you do that? I mean, one sort of approach that I heard was to just say some words like this. Don't insist on dealing with it. Don't tell a person they have to, sit and listen to you. But to come to them and say, hey, I know I hurt you. I'm really sorry for what I did. I want to do whatever I can to make it up. Could we talk about this? Like, give them an opportunity. If they're not ready, give them an opportunity to say, no, I don't, just say, can we just open the door of the possibility? They have to be given the power to make decisions whether they want to hear you or not. To actually force them to listen to you can be extremely counterproductive. Again, as I mentioned earlier, maybe things won't turn out the way that you're hoping or you're expecting, and that can be really disappointing. But you cannot place expectations on those you've hurt. And so to think through our approach. The last of timing, approach, and the last thing is to find the right measures. This can be tough. It might cost your money. You might have to pay somebody back some stuff. There's all kinds of different ways in which, as you say, hey, how can I make this right? This could leave us in a position where we're extremely vulnerable and we're not exactly sure what's gonna happen. One way that might help is if you can imagine, okay, if someone hurt me the way that I hurt them, what would I expect them to do for me? How is it that if someone hurt me that way, what would I want them to do? Just to think through that, maybe from their side of the sword. But again, this is something that is extremely delicate to figure out what exactly I need to do. What can I do that is going to improve or that will help to repair what I broke in this relationship? There's countless issues to consider. And I know that as we talk about this, there's so many things that I've not mentioned. I'm just trying to give a glimpse of the opportunity that step 9 offers us. We live in a world of pain, and step 9 reminds us that we have a choice. We do have a choice. We can just run away and hide. We can pretend it's no big deal. We can deny it ever happened. We can pretend that there's nothing wrong. Or we can face the facts. We can face the facts and choose to acknowledge our wrongs and do our very best to move forward. If we decide the denial route, then we are stuck in a life that is stagnated, that is paralyzing, and is never going to be developing meaningful relationships with God or with others. But if we decide that we are going to make a decision to face the facts that we've done wrong and that we want to do our very best to repair what we've broken, it gives us the opportunity to move forward into a new kind of hope. It's a new kind of life where we experience the peace, serenity, and the freedom that our hearts really long for. It's what we were created for. It's community.